Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast, the show that brings you the latest insights, thought leadership and stories from across the global mining industry. In today's show, we've got Shaun Bunn, who's the managing director at Empire Metals, who are AIM and OTC-traded exploration and resources development company who are developing the Pitfield, an emerging giant titanium project in Western Australia. We're going to talk about titanium, a critical mineral that the West desperately needs more of, and discuss the purity of the Pitfield discovery. We're also going to discuss why its location and government backing really matter. And we're also going to continue with what makes the deposit fundamentally different from most other titanium projects worldwide. Most importantly, we're going to discuss how the difference could give Empire a serious strategic advantage as secure supply becomes a global priority, and so much more we're going to speak about and a lot to unpack. So, Shaun, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, well, really well, thanks, Rob. Yeah, keen to get into this discussion.
Yeah, and obviously we were speaking off air, and there's obviously a lot going on. So before we go and dig deep into that, just wanted you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your career, how your career's grown over the years to present days. So yeah, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rob. Well, look, I'm a metallurgist by profession. Did my early years in the School of Mines in Western Australia in Kalgoorlie, and spent most of that early part of the career in what we call here in Australia the bush. No hands-on, mainly working in gold, nickel, some other commodities from time to time. But it was really a great foundation, I thought, for a professional. Metallurgy is one of the key cornerstones of the mining industry, and I think if you look back over maybe the last 20 years, and this is a nice link to critical minerals, for instance. We're mining and processing much more complex ores, much more complex minerals, much more difficult to recover elements, and that's to feed a changing world. So, the processes and the metallurgical side of that, the chemistry, is evolving and constantly challenging, and you need innovation, you need courage amongst all things to tackle some of these projects. So yeah, I look back over now. I hate to say it, it's over 40 odd years of a career that's taken me around the world. I've been to the middle of the Sahara Desert. I've operated within 100 kilometers of the North Pole. So, it's just been an amazing journey, and worked on some incredible, exciting projects. And I have to be honest and say that towards the end of my, I'm getting towards the twilight of a career, but, finding the world's largest titanium ore body in history is just a great way to top it all off.
Yeah. Just want to cover you. Obviously, you mentioned about your background being in metallurgy and processing. And what you tend to find is a lot of managing directors, CEOs of mining companies, especially the junior space, are either geologists, finance people, but not too many in the processing and metallurgy space. How would you say that has affected you being the CEO of a mining company, or has it had a lot of advantages being more at the back end of a project, or your background has been, rather than being maybe a geologist or mine engineer, etc.?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. The angle that comes from is where does the managing director, what's his role in the business? And, it's great to have a technical background. It's great to understand the process and the understanding of how to develop a project. So I think they are ticks in the right box. But, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your team's point of view, is I don't get to spend a lot of time on the actual processing and test work. And, I spend a lot of time talking to investors and public relations and governments and communities. So there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think that, a managing director that comes into a team and manages a great team and then wants to get into the weeds and dictate how the processing works, for instance, is not really doing. He's not a managing director, is he? He's something else. So, I've tended to give my team a lot of room to create, to innovate, and to be, as technically sound as they can, and where I need to, I give them some guidance. So yeah, I'll answer the question directly. I think it's an advantage for us at this point in time and where we're heading and where we've come from.
So just wondering if you can just give a snapshot of Empire Metals.
Yeah, look, the project that we discovered, Pitfield, we entered into this about now probably nearly 3 years ago, where we went up there looking for copper. It's the project's only about a 3-hour drive north of Perth on a major highway. It's in the Midwest wheat belt area. Its location is not far from the coast, close to port and rail. So the basic area is something that we were looking for, because working on historical artisanal copper mining areas, and thinking that would be a great target. And we were a bit blindsided when we found that we'd found this massive titanium deposit. I'll talk about the minerals a bit later and how this thing works, but we've found what is clearly the world's largest titanium system on the planet. We've got a 2.2 billion mineral resource, and that covers less than 1/5 of the area. And we've only measured that down just on about 100 meters, and we've drilled at least 400 into this. So, this is truly one of the world's great discoveries.
How important is titanium in today's world, and what are the supply issues faced by the Western world at the moment?
Yeah, so titanium sits on these critical mineral lists, or metal list in this particular case would be a better example. And I just want, maybe take a little sidetrack. Why are these things critical in the first place? Not just titanium, but the others. And you got to look through that and think, well, it's not that the minerals are critical in themselves. It's the end applications. It's what are these things used for in this evolving world? You've seen a lot of change in demand for certain types of minerals over the last 10, 20, 30 years. Supply chains have been disrupted. So, and I can give an example of several different commodities, not just titanium, rare earths, lithium, those things, the demand is racketing up and the supply is becoming more concentrated, in certain jurisdictions like China. Titanium's fallen into that sort of, generic geopolitical, structure. So basically, titanium is essential for aircraft, for a lot of day-to-day needs. Titanium's as strong as steel and half the weight. It's used in electric vehicles. It's getting importance in sort of lithium batteries, actually, believe it or not. It's using more and more titanium. So what we're seeing is an increase in demand from the Western world in particular, all from China supplying end products to the Western world. But the concentration of supply sits in, firstly, China, something like 60% of all the metal. Russia supplies a very large proportion of the titanium metal, even despite sanctions. And on third on the list is Japan. So you're dealing with, as I said, a very complex, almost geopolitical sort of use of these commodities in sort of trade wars or bargaining tools. And the Western countries and Europe, particularly now with their increase in NATO spending, for instance, needs to build more aircraft. It needs more fighter jets to fill that that part of its guarantee to NATO. So where's the titanium going to come from? It's simply a scarce supply, very significant shift in demand, and we see titanium being a very critical mineral for a very long time to come.
And where is titanium produced outside of those, obviously, particular countries, I suppose, more in the Western world? I take it it's in pretty limited supply.
Well, not necessarily. And another interesting fact is that the titanium, 90% of the titanium in the world actually goes into pigments, and titanium pigments are the whitest and brightest of any pigment that you can get. It's non-toxic, and basically there is no substitution for it. So it goes into paints, it goes into toothpaste, it goes into plastics, paper. So its everyday use is throughout our society. It's always been there for about the last 100 years, if you like. Ilmenite, the mineral ilmenite, which is a titanium iron mineral, and it's basically, people understand you go to the beach, you see all the black minerals on the beach. These black minerals are basically ilmenite-rich heavy minerals. So beach sand mining has been predominantly supplying ilmenite for a very long time. Others like Rio in Canada extract the titanium from hard rock, but they have to smelt that. They go through a smelting process to concentrate it up. The important takeaway here is that there's plenty of supply of ilmenites, but ilmenite is a refractory mineral. It's a difficult mineral to process. It's almost 50 or more % iron, and so you've got a big waste product, and it's very costly to treat. So if you can find a better source of titanium that gives you a cheaper, a better alternative to get to a high-value product, you're going to have an advantage over 90% of the world's supply.
I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about the project in terms of obviously size, scale, purity of obviously the deposit.
Yeah, we started exploration here, as I said, about 3 years ago, but we started with geophysics, airborne magnetics, airborne electroconductivity type testing. We identified an anomaly, if you like, in what is a sedimentary basin. So sediments are, like sandstones, siltstones, bedded sand that is formed over time. So generally you don't see these big, it's not like there's big injections of hot lava or something that's pumped minerals or metals into this. It's generally full of quartz, low-grade value minerals. So we were looking at this anomaly, trying to work out what it was. It's 30 kilometres long, averaging about 10 kilometres wide, and we've measured it down about 5 kilometres into this basin, and it keeps going. So it could well go down go down 10 k's. And we just couldn't work out how the hell, where this came from and what it was, and lots of theories about what might be in this ore body. So, we drill tested it and found it was full of titanium. So you're dealing with a very unusual deposit. It's been altered several times by Mother Nature, and the titanium is changed in its form. So its original form, its original mineral form, has been altered naturally in the ground. And as a consequence, we've got, as I said, a couple of billion tons of ore just sitting right at the surface, no waste, no soil on top of it. It sits right at surface. Every meter of every drill hole we've ever drilled into it's full of titanium. So scale is off the planet. It's probably represents at least a third of the world's total resource in one spot. Grade, we're getting between 5, 6, 7, up to 10% TiO2 in situ. A mineral sand on the beach typically runs 1%. So we've got anywhere between 5 and 10 times better grade just sitting there. And purity, I mean, I mentioned this as sandstones. So sandstones are quartz. They're not heavy minerals. There's no chrome. There are no radionuclides. There's no uranium or thorium. So you don't have any of those really difficult to remove or contaminating impurities that affect pigment or for that matter, metal. You can imagine if you're making toothpaste, you don't want your titanium radioactive. So, those are important considerations all the way through the industry. And so we found something that is truly of incredible scale, grade, and purity, just sitting up there, as I said, 3.5 hours north of Perth under a wheat belt.
And at the time of obviously this recording, as we were just speaking off air, you've actually announced some information around a drill program. So I just wonder if you can let our audience know a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, over the period that we've been drilling, exploring, we've been measuring out, trying to determine the extent of this ore body through drill testing. The proof is always at the end of the drill bit. And so the programs that we've run to date identified some high-grade targets. We refer to these based on the farming areas, the farmers. So there's a target to the south called Tonne, a target in the sort of the middle of the anomaly called Cosgrove. We released an MRE on those two targets, prospects, October last year. So that's the 2.2 billion tonnes. And, when we look back at that and we thought about where we got to, we realised that, we needed to come back in and infill some of those targets to get to measured and indicated. Mainly the targets are currently indicated and inferred. So we're going to increase the confidence level in those particular resources. But we also identified the fact that particularly around Cosgrove, that we'd only really sort of, excuse well, it's not really a pun, but, the analogy is we only scratched the surface, so to speak. So I wanted to infill around that a little bit more and increase the target area at Cosgrove. And that would allow us to have two main resource targets to take into mining plans. Gives us optionality, some high-grade targets to refine. But overall, probably will end up doubling or tripling the entire resource. So it's a pretty major undertaking. 40-odd thousand metres of drilling. Probably take us anywhere between 2-3 months to complete. But it's a very exciting program, Rob. It's really going to put this thing on the absolute supergiant scale.
So I wonder if you can just tell me why the project's location is advantageous, and is there government support for Pitfield's development?
Well, if you wanted to put a cross on the map somewhere in, well, not just Australia, anywhere on the planet, you want to put it somewhere which was easy locatable, easy to get to, safe mining jurisdiction, close to port, infrastructure already in place, and security of tenure, and we tick all those boxes. These are wheat farms. They're privately owned land. We have access agreements in place with our farmers across the resource. So access is not a problem for the time being. We can get in and drill around the crops and harvests. The other important factor is that there's a rail system and a high voltage power line system running through the middle of the tenements that have been established previously. They've been there for, the wheat is shipped to port by rail. The power system was put in for the Midwest iron producers. So you got access to high voltage. You got a gas pipeline that runs from the northwest shelf down to the south, probably runs about 30 k's to the west of us, so easy to tap into. Iluka are building their massive rare earth cracking plant. That's only about 60 k's away to the southwest of us, and whilst it doesn't relate to our minerals or our deposit, it does show that there's an enormous amount of investment going into that particular part of the world. So, access, climate, you name it, it's absolutely fantastic spot to be in.
And why is Pitfield's titanium minerals so different from any minerals around the rest of the world?
Yeah, this is a really fundamental question, because in understanding the minerals, we can start to look at the metallurgy, if you like, and understand how you can process this. So we partnered up with the Curtin Universities, the geological department at Curtin. Professor Katie Evans heads up that department. We've had several postdoctorates working on this for a couple of years now. What we identified is that this original, I mean, the ore body itself goes back, thousands of millions of years. So it wasn't sitting there always. It's formed. It's probably formed by a conventional iron-rich, titanium-rich lava that's pumped up and then eroded and fallen into the basin. But how it's formed is the basin has sort of captured it and concentrated it up over time in a very unusual way that has meant that the minerals didn't escape. They didn't disappear like you have on a beach where a lot of the minerals get washed away over time. That they've been captured and confined. And then about 600 odd million years ago, some sort of alteration events occurred. We've dated the minerals, through the universities. And the minerals have completely been altered by some natural hydrothermal event. So in other words, a hot oxidizing fluid got pumped in and it changed the minerals. And that's the exciting thing. It's like the titanium leached out of the rock and then reformed a new mineral. That has also altered. So Australia being a really old, continent, the weathering has affected that over time as well. So now the mineral is broken up even further. So the time, we turn up and start digging it up, what's in the ground's already been changed a couple of times by simple nature. So we took a view that yes, that was an unusual mineral mix and different to beach sands and other things. We've got no ilmenite in the ore body, for instance. It's all changed. But we took the view that there'll be advantages of that. So our minerals are already a TiO2 mineral. It's a mineral called anatase. We've also got some rutile, which has always been there. It's a primary mineral. So our target in the oxidized weathered cap, which is, the couple of billion tons, is already converted to TiO2. What we have to do is extract it, separate it from the gangue, bring it into solution again, and concentrate out the titanium. It's like replicating the chemistry that's already happened over time, only trying to do it in 24 hours and not 600 million years. So it's incredibly different to, for instance, an ilmenite deposit, where you've got all this iron and refractory minerals that need high temperature, lots of acid, lots of polluting acidic waste from the iron. So you've got all those challenges in the industry. We don't seem to have to face those.
Yeah. And because of obviously this mineralization, how does this give Empire an advantage?
Well, the first thing, as I mentioned earlier, is 90% of the world's supply comes from one mineral, ilmenite. And, it's been around for about, the industry is an old industry. It's not something that's just happened overnight. So for the last 100 odd years, industry has processed and generated titanium pigments and metal, through a fairly regimented and consistent way. You either concentrate out the ilmenite, use gravity. Some people convert the ilmenite to what we call synthetic rutile. They burn off the iron or they roast it and get rid of the iron. And then they can either treat it with sulfuric acid or they can put it in through what they call the chlorinators, which is using chlorine gas. So there are two fundamental process routes depending on the quality of the feed. The thing that we see is we don't have to go to those high temperatures. We don't have to remove the iron. We don't have to cook this thing up to 1,000 degrees and pour chlorine gas on it. Our most recent leaching test work, we've actually been doing that at atmospheric conditions. In other words, there's no pressure. We heat it up, but we don't have to heat it up more than just over 100 degrees or so. And you could do that in open tanks. So incredibly simpler, lower energy, less polluting process. What we have to do, of course, is perfect the way that we get the minerals into that, how we concentrate up the minerals. And we also have to perfect how we modify the material to make high premium products. So there's still fundamental things that, chemicals and techniques that we have to apply. But the middle bit, oh gosh, this thing just falls apart.
And lastly, and concluding, what's the outlook for, say, the next 12 to 18 months? And is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah, look, we've announced, the drilling outline that we announced this morning, as I said, goes maybe for a couple of months, big program. That gives us an upgraded MRE at Thomas. It gives us a much bigger MRE at Cosgrove. It sets us up to go into mine planning. So we'll get reserves, mine designs moving. The key here is to finish our metallurgical testing on the flow sheet. That's been ongoing now for about, close to 6 months. We're close to finalising the preferred flow sheet to take to study. So once we finish optimising the front end and coming up with a few ideas about how best to produce our mineral concentrates and get it into that simple leach circuit, we can get into the engineering studies. So that's towards later in 2026. With the view that, of course, that we'll be going into more detailed feasibility type work, towards the end of the year or early next. So got a great team in place. Been recruiting over the last couple of years, really talented, scientists, metallurgists, geologists, engineers. Great marketing guy joined us just before Christmas. So we've got the key team in place, well backed by local government and institutions, universities. So we've got the access to the scientists and the technical support here in Perth, and we're well placed to keep this momentum going. We raised £7 million last October with just 4 institutional investors who have been backing us, really supportive. So well funded and focused on getting through this critical phase of process design and de-risking. We don't really have any exploration risk to say. We don't have, tenure risk. Those sort of, mining risks are going to be really low. So we're really focused on getting the process chemistry working in our favour, and then coming back to the market with a plan and a product that we can start marketing. Start marketing to the end users. So lots happening, but well placed to do it.
Shaun, really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for giving us an overview of Empire Metals, telling us all obviously about titanium and obviously the project and how you're moving forward. And it's a great story, and wish you well with the drilling campaign over the coming months. If our audience wants to reach out to you, get news feed and updates on the drill program, if they've got any questions they want to ask you and follow the story, how can they go about doing that, and what social media platform channels are you on?
Yeah, well, they can follow us on Twitter and what is X now, I guess, and LinkedIn. But we've got, if they go to our website at Empire Metals, they'll find there'll be a link there where they can put in any requests and inquiries to our team. And generally, we get back to people pretty quickly, depending on whether it's, obviously we can't deal with market sensitive information at times, but we do try and respond to our shareholders and those people interested in our progress.
Yeah. As always, we include those details in the show notes for easy access so our audience can reach out to you and obviously follow the story. So good luck with the drilling program. Maybe you can come on the podcast later in the year and give us an update.
Certainly. Thanks, Rob.
No worries. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you for your continued support, as always. We're speaking obviously about a different commodity here, titanium, obviously a critical mineral. So appreciate if you can share this episode far and wide. I don't think we've spoken about titanium before, so it may be a new commodity and a new information that you can share with people that you know within the industry. So thank you again for listening, and until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.